that's been the focus of my work, to capture at the turn of a century and the turn of a millennium. This is what we look like today, not by 1,000 photographers, not by 10,000 photographers, but one person that has traveled the 50 states and attempted to capture a portrait of we the people. The will of the people is a voice that knows no nationalities. America didn't invent this. We just turned it into a highly successful system of how we conduct human affairs. And that's possibly America's greatest export. So my photographs are just a personal one-man attempt to capture what I believe is the greatest idea of the second millennium. And now, as we're entering the third millennium, the idea is the same. You know, it's a messy system of government. It's a messy system of doing things, but it's the best system so far. And hopefully it's America's gift to the world. And hopefully it's something worth photographing, because that's what I've attempted to devote my career to. My work will ultimately be defined in the totality and how the imagery interacts with each other, because I'm really creating more of a mosaic portrait of America. You know, the guy that lives in the backyard of Monument Valley, that goes there 200 times a year, will always have the best shot, you know, but he may not be going to New York City. He may not be going to Miami. You know, he may not be shooting Los Angeles out of a helicopter. So that's where I think, you know, everybody has a set of pros and cons. And if I have a set of advantages, it's probably that I have a macro view. There are many people that have micro views where they want to see all the extreme details. And that's great, but that's not, you know, that's not my point of view. I'm trying to look at the big picture, you know, and that's why I shoot a big camera, because it produces big pictures, and I'm looking for the spectacular. I think America's landscapes rival any. I've been to all 7 continents. I've photographed from Antarctica to China to Cuba to Kenya, and I think America's landscapes rival any continent in the world. And it's most convenient to me because I grew up here, so I feel pretty much at home behind a rental car or an RV, driving the back roads of America, just looking for stunning real estate. And I'm not talking about real estate to buy, but real estate to photograph. I seem to be able to separate whether I'm shooting landscapes or cities, and then I don't want any people in them. And then, or if I'm isolating people. And to me, people are more challenging to photograph than a landscape. Landscape is easier if the weather is, you know, helping you out, giving you beautiful lighting and everything. And people are harder because you need to talk to them. I mean, with a landscape or a cityscape, I don't have to say anything. And so it's always challenging for me with my camera, walking up to somebody, and whether either talking with them, asking them permission, taking a photograph, or in some cases, if it's a sensitive situation, like a homeless person in Beverly Hills, where I found this amazing shot of a homeless man laying on the street in front of the Beverly Hills Bank. And I thought that was an amazing image. Now, I came back 10 minutes later, and that guy was gone, because Beverly Hills police are not too interested in that as an icon for Beverly Hills. But fortunately, I had the camera with me, and I got the shot. But to get the shot, I had to lay on the ground next to him. Now, did I get his permission? No, he was unconscious. But what I was trying to say was, in a land of plenty, you know, how can this happen? And so, If I'm photographing presidents, and I've photographed, presidential campaigns since the 80s, I ultimately became President Clinton's photographer in 1992, and I've not missed a presidential campaign since. Photographing presidents is easier to photograph them. It's all about access, because in a lot of ways they're like shooting icons. Ultimately they become icons. But shooting the man on the street, or what is a genre that it developed in the 50s and 60s called street photography, that's more or less my people style. I am driving, I'm walking down the street, I see people that interest me, and I either ask them, talk to them, or do not talk to them and take their picture. And in doing so, the same way that I'm doing with my icons and landscapes, if I capture enough different people in America, then I start to capture what I'm seeking, which is we the people, the first three words of the U.S. Constitution, which, by the way, it's the 225th anniversary of the Constitution this year. So, I'm attempting to capture we the people. Basically, photographically work with optimal conditions. The best possible glass made, which for me is specific cameras that I use, which are Canon and Fuji cameras. The best possible, if it's digital, the state-of-the-art digital camera, which has the best optical sensor in it, or the highest quality film. In this case, for me, for landscapes, is Fuji Velvia. The ideal iconic locations of America, because my subject is the United States, under perfect lighting, under perfect weather conditions. And when you put all those together, and a high degree of personal patience to wait for those conditions to line up, that taking the picture for 1/8 of a second with my index finger is the easy part. When I personally was younger, I did think I could photograph it all, but I've ultimately concluded that's impossible. And I've made my best attempt. I've possibly seen as much of the United States as any person alive. I mean, if there are 20 more people that have seen more of America than myself, the only thing I'd want to know is how many radials have you gone through? And let me see your MasterCard to see if you've been across to all 50 states and how long you stayed. So in my youth, I attempted to cover everything. But now, in the wisdom of age, I've realized it's impossible. And number two, that, there's a famous film director. It said, basically, films are never finished. They're abandoned. You can never really finish it. So whether it's a painting, an interview, photographing America, I think it's the same story. So consequently, where the art comes in is which aspects do you choose to display that are representational? So I think that's the key word, is it representational of what you cannot tell? So is your question alluding to something much bigger? And, that's like a metaphor. Where the story with the implied untold story, the implied unshown image, is much bigger than what you've actually shown. So, and I think that's the role of the artist, to do that, to isolate what represents the larger untold. I, as a former American history teacher, growing up in the Midwest on the banks of the Mississippi, I always felt like I was quintessentially American in many respects. And there's a quote by one of my favorite founding fathers, who's a Frenchman, the Marquis Lafayette, who helped us win the Revolution. And his quote was, "The moment I heard of America, I loved her." And someplace in my own being, I fell in love with our country. And not in a bumper sticker way, but as I've studied our history, what I've come to conclude that the beginnings of America was the beginnings of what many people now refer to as the new paradigm, meaning humankind reordered the way it conducted itself. We no longer believed in kings and queens. It's taken 2 centuries. We still have plenty of kings and queens out there, but with the beginning of America was the birth of the common man. And instead of having a top-down, an aristocracy, a nobility, a monarchy, where kings and queens told us how to believe and how to behave, we reordered our affairs in a system called democracy. And as a result, the common man gave birth to a new dream. So consequently, I felt how America has developed over 2 centuries needs to be captured. How democracy has personified and visualized itself would be my focus. So consequently, I asked myself a question: how do you photograph democracy? Which is a challenging question. I mean, it's sort of like saying, how do you photograph an idea? And I realized you could never photograph an idea, but what you could do is to capture how that idea has manifested itself in our cities, in our small towns, in the games we play, and in we the people. A little bit less of this and a little more of displaying my work in new media, because this is a renaissance now that we're living in of new media, and the old and the new and everything is being turned upside down and inside out. And it's a challenging time, but the digital age has given birth to tremendous opportunities, and I hope to display my work. I mean, I have my work now. My tabletop book, which is a 7-pound book, is now in an iPad and can be downloaded on iTunes. So the fact that you can download your life's work on iTunes is pretty radical. So, and I want to be part of that.